Hello, we're going to be talking about the poet's tools, but before we actually do that, let's have a look at what we mean by poetry. Let's have a definition of poetry. Well, actually no, not just one definition, because there are so many definitions out there. What I've done is I've found some on the web. Let's have a look at some of those. A composition written in metrical feet forming rhythmical lines. An organisation of lines of text on a page. Poetry is a form of art in which language is used for its aesthetic and evocative qualities in addition to, or in lieu of, its ostensible meaning. A work in metre or free verse employing figurative language. A composition in verse, either in metre or in free verse. Don't get too worried about those terms at the moment, because that's precisely the sort of thing we're going to be looking at later on. So, a composition in verse, either in metre or in free verse, characterised by the imaginative treatment of experience and a heightened use of language more intensive than ordinary speech. A composition utilising rhyme, metre, concrete detail and expressive language to create a literary experience with emotional and aesthetic appeal. So that's quite a variety of definitions. And one more that I didn't get off the web, I got it out of a book by Ruth Padell. The book is 52 Ways of Looking at a Poem. And Ruth Padell talks of poetry as the oldest, most passionate, concentrated literary form. So that's quite a selection of definitions, isn't it? But one thing that's interesting is that most of these definitions have as part of them, they've focused on one or other of the tools that the poet uses. So actually here we can see already some of the tools that we'll be looking at. Yes, I think that's a bit better. But let's have it as a list, it'll be easier. Okay, so we've got metre, rhythm, layout, aesthetic, evocative, heightened and expressive language, figurative language, imaginative use of experience, concrete detail, intense and concentrated language, and rhyme. These are some of the tools that we're going to be looking at later on in the course. But one thing that I want to look at first, before we move on to those, I want to share my favourite quote from Phil Roberts. He talks of the most complex and adult word game of all, the poem. And what I like about that is the fact that Phil Roberts describes the poem as a game. A lot of people studied poetry in school and it became a chore. It was something that was obligatory. They had to study it. It was complicated. And I don't think it needs to be like that. I think that poetry can be a game. But whether you're watching a game or playing it, it's a lot more fun if you actually understand what's going on. If you understand the rules of the game, and if you understand the equipment of the game, and you can see whether people are using the equipment well or badly, how they could improve. And if you're playing the game, you understand how you can improve. So I think if we want to play this game of poetry, we need to understand the rules and the equipment. Well, maybe not rules, because actually poetry doesn't have so many rules. It has guidelines. One of the things about poetry is that it doesn't have rules. It's not like maths. There's no teacher going to come along and say, yes, you've got the right answer, it's 100%. There's always going to be some disagreement, although there will be consensus about whether a poem is working or not. So really this workshop, it does come with a bit of a warning. There are no objectively correct answers in poetry. However, as we said, it's going to be more fun if you understand the guidelines and the equipment. So, yes, it will help both as a reader and as a writer if you know how to use the tools effectively. If you understand them as a writer, you'll be able to write better poetry, and as a reader, you'll be able to have an informed opinion, and you'll be able to understand whether the poet who you're reading, whether they've been successful or not in what they're trying to do. So, this is what we're going to be looking at in the later sections.